I've been our kids are
Can you hear me? Like this is really not a birthday class. How did you hear me? So I hope everybody's here for Global Health and Professional Workforce Session 1. Yes? Yes? Okay. So before we start, I'm going to try to break you guys up. There's a lot of school medicine here. Is there anybody that's not school medicine here? Ooh, yay! Let's see about getting you guys to join one of these tables, and then as people filter in, they can kind of make their own table. So, welcome to session 1. I feel like you're so far away from me. Oh, wow, look, I have this. So on each of your tables, you will notice that there are a stack of index cards. If each person could grab one of them and write down 3 reasons that you're interested in global health. It doesn't have to be perfect handwriting. It doesn't have to be sentences. Don't write your name on it. Just quickly jot down those 3 things and put them face down in the middle of your desk.
She said 3 reasons.
Do I write it here?
So you can use arrows.
Dr. GHICC, can you hear me?
Okay, so I see people are finishing up, so we'll go ahead and get started. I really can't provide for me during you do these arrows. Okay, that's fine. So, since this is our first session, the first part of today is going to be about us getting to know each other and you guys getting to know each other as well. We'll establish the ground rules. I'm sure by now with PDL and all your small groups that you all are expert champions at being able to do this. And then we'll delve into the session, which is really about international development. Has anybody heard the term development before? Can you tell me a little bit about what what would be your definition of that?
International development.
I'm sorry.
International development.
Yes.
So basically, trying to improve the infrastructure of like certain fields, for example, like healthcare, like healthcare systems, trying to grow sustainably, like the quality of and creating lasting.
Okay, I think that really sums up everything really nicely, which is a type of transformational change where you take something, usually a community and a nation, some entity, or a piece of the healthcare system or agriculture, whatever it might be, and enhance and improve. So before we get to kind of the meat of development, we're going to go through a little bit of the history of development. So even though you're all here wanting to be amazing global health professionals, global health work itself has its own history. So we're going to go through a bit of that history, which is going to start in the colonial times and kind of catch up to date. And for each of our sessions, we have competencies that are linked to global health competencies that we have. Okay. So now that you've completed your cards, I'll come around. Can we turn the lights on in the front? Yes. If somebody can do that in the back. It's one of those two buttons back there, I think. So we'll do some introductions right now where in the context of your groups, if you can designate a reporter to introduce everybody else in the group, your name, your school, and something memorable about yourself or something interesting or unique. And then the reporter is going to pick the best story, and the rest of us are going to try to figure out who that story belongs to. Okay. So one reporter, and then introduce yourselves, and then pick what your best story is. And I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do this.
Like this is the story about like something you have to do, like this.
Can we use the paper on the table?
Like what kind of story?
No, you're just anything.
Oh yeah.
They're going to tell you.
Yeah, you're the reporter. Doesn't need a reporter, Kim?
So you want to start off? Okay, yeah. That was sorry. Okay, look next. Not on podcast.
I'm simply in the I just want to see like my punch out.
Okay, do you have anything to talk about? What's his name?
I just like
Why are you playing Dallas?
you can buy
I have no Anyway, I'm well, before I got my I taught for a little bit, I traveled, had fun. How would you make well, I did a couple of places. I know you don't know players that are going we don't mind. around the Caribbean?
You know, like that.
That's cool.
They like this farm.
Where?
One time I got on the back of the boat, I started my
Yeah. And then it was while I was while I was talking Sanskrit. Yeah, I was speaking Sanskrit underwater to the octopus that I was babysitting. While we were talking, I got hit by a taxi driver and then tried to pick me up and put him in his car.
Wait, so you didn't have the octopus?
They have me, I'm not an octopus. It's a Sanskrit, so it's not. Where's the... Okay, we're not allowed to die because of and fire. And so we just got to think about it. We were really close. Oh, I'm sick. Yeah. You got bronchitis. I know. I got bronchitis. Anyway, I know. It really was a really cool. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, you have to get up. You have to get up in front of the whole crew. Yeah, you have to get up in front of the whole crew. Just like introduce all of us and then tell the story.
So you said Italy, Hungary, Greece, and which one?
I say from,
No, I'm not going to
there is your greatest act. Christopher Roberts. Not Christopher Roberts. Eric Roberts. And Christopher I did engineering, so it's past I did text support. Just go straight. It's pretty brutal. You do a lot of we're still charging acid.
You acted out. If you're together,
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I can say that. But also, so far we got Sanskrit
And it turns out that you are hallucinating the whole
while you're writing the
my paddle. Like I started swimming, like you took my paddle, racket it under. So it didn't have to be about 45 seconds.
While you were supposed to be watching a Sanskrit.
This all happened really on my I breathed up for air until I was riding a boat and was outside. And Megan was babysitting home in Spain. This is all in Spain.
This is all in Spain.
This is all in Spain.
Now.
Story. Yeah.
So all in Spain, but the finals to in Georgia.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Do you want
Just check. Give me a checklist. Check.
Yeah, I think we might be able to wider audience.
You can translate. I bet you can sign too. You're like, oh, you can sign.
All I know is how are you?
Oh, you did.
This way.
How
Not this way.
This is by taxi. It's by taxi.
You go in the car.
You guys riding a mouse. I think what we didn't hear is now 45 seconds.
1 minute, guys.
One interesting story about yourself. So yeah, we got kidnapped. You got hit by a car. Kidnapped by an octopus. Speaks 4 languages. Wow. No, yeah, something more.
Everybody does that.
Yeah. You? Yeah, except for ours is not going to stay with it.
Alright guys, it's time. Let's come back together. Clap if you can hear me. Thank you. So let's start with introductions. I heard some very interesting tales that I was trying not to eavesdrop. So who's our reporter? Tell us who you are and introduce everybody else.
I'm Pradeep. So am I going in random order and they have to guess who's the interesting
Or is it just
thing
one
belongs to?
It's the best story. Just tell us the best story. First introduce everybody.
Wow. We
and
don't
then
discuss
tell
which one's the best.
Wait, introduce everybody first.
This is, I haven't met you before, you just walked in. This is Ziad. Ziad? Okay, this is Sue. This is Megan, Andrew, this is Florentino. Where's your?
Oh, I don't have one.
Micah, and this is Zach, and I'm Prithvi.
And what school is everybody from?
We're all School of Medicine. Yeah. We didn't intend for that, but that's not
Yeah, we didn't intend for that either.
Yeah.
And I guess you can pick what you thought the most interesting story was.
One of us got bit by an octopus while we were diving in Cozumel at night. That's section. Section even know.
So you like
He has the weirdest stories.
Thanks.
What's it make?
More
wild in Mexico.
I don't know. What's the final answer?
Are we allowed to give them like multiple choice, like our car exams and everything?
A and B, B and C, C and D.
What do you say? Okay. Is that going to be our final answer?
Yeah.
This is my go, by the way. Does he look like the kind of guy who'd get bit by an octopus?
And Cosmo at night?
Or does he look like the kind of guy who'd bite the octopus?
So, who is it? Tell us about your story.
So I've lived in Mexico for 2 months, and I got my dive master certification. And one of the dives I went on, it was at night. It was a night dive because it was fishing on at night. So we went diving, and a whole bunch of octopus like there. And then this one, I got too close, kind of close, and when it grabbed on my leg. So I took my fin off. I tried to like get it off my legs, like get it go. And then it went from my leg to my foot, and then it bit my foot, and then it ran away. I'm like, this is great.
What did that feel like?
It hurt.
I know, but like, I don't know, like the texture.
It was just weird. Like it was slimy and it was weird. Like I just felt weird. It was like finally out. And then we went, and then I'm like, it wasn't that bad, but it was kind of cool.
Is your foot okay now?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, what about this group here? Who's our reporter?
Okay, so we are all school of medicine except for Jessica, who is the School of Health Professions, right? So this is Chin, Seth, Paulette, Erin, Katie, and I'm Elise. So this person in our group was traveling out of the country for the first time, and this person was going to 5 different countries in Europe for 2 weeks, ended up getting over there and got the flu and bronchitis while this person was there, and then brought it back over and gave it to this person's entire family. So, who was it?
What do you think?
Smiling over there.
You know, awkward smile.
Eric.
What were the 5 countries? Maybe that'll help us.
I don't know if I can remember that. Maybe this person will tell you.
Fuzzy brand.
I think that's
He does not live
People are split. So who is it?
Oh, it's me.
Picked her own story.
I didn't think it
None of your stories are interesting.
Because when they asked what countries, they immediately all looked at it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that has to be.
Yeah.
You guys are picking up on context.
that was good.
So where did you go?
So I went to Prague, Rome, Budapest, Paris, Athens, and St.
Was that your plan, or did you actually bake it?
I made it. I did it.
I don't know.
I was like, no.
That was good.
Okay, last group, who's our reporter?
Okay, so I'm Preston, School of Medicine. We're all School of Medicine, except for Sydney. She's on physical therapy. Cornelia, Robert, let's see. You, latest edition. No, you're part of the bowl now. Michael, Sarah, and Lori. One of us ate poison mushrooms as a child.
Where?
Where?
Yeah.
Outside. I guess home. Front yard.
Dang it.
This one of us. It's one of the guys.
Rusty, you didn't eat mushrooms.
I ate all of them. Every time I saw him.
Or was it poison?
Yeah.
Braulio, did you grow up in the US?
What's
Or did you grow up in this country? tropical country, Nicaragua or something, that it would be like, oh, maybe you'll have mushrooms there in the rainforest.
What do you think? Which one is you want to go?
They both have like grins on their face.
Yeah, they do. They're both just like.
I was disappointed. So who is it? I knew it was you.
Robert. That's what happened. And where did you grow up? Since that seems to be relevant.
I grew up in Virginia, but this is in Texas.
What happened?
So we actually have a couple of folks that are joining us online that I wanted to see if they can introduce themselves, if I can figure out how to do this.
Dr. Patel, can you see my webcam?
We can hear you.
And can you see my webcam? Can you see my video?
No.
Are you on your go-to meeting?
Dr.
There
Uchi,
you are. Oh, there's your webcam. I see the profile. So I had two online. I don't know if I still have two. Jeff Moore is a transition DPT student, so he already has his PT license, but he is in our transition from a master's to a doctoral level. And then Kirby Capps is a DPT traditional student. And the interesting things that might you can see if you can guess. One of these students has two different colored eyes.
Let
me see.
What do you think? Your odds are pretty good at guessing here.
You have names.
Jeff Moore and Kirby Capps.
Jeff and Kirby. What do you guys think?
We got a 50-50
For some reason, people think it's Kirby. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh, good deduction. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Okay, I got the message from Jeff here. So we're going to go ahead and keep going. We have a couple of ground rules, which I don't think are incredibly controversial. You know, be able to voice your opinions and your concerns, draw on your own personal experience and your travels and some of the global health experience that you guys have already. Speak your mind, but obviously be very respectful and participate in the discussion to get out of this and just be open to new ideas and have fun. We get a little bit frontal this late, but so we might be a little, we're a little bit more reserved now that we know that everything. But they can't always hear you guys, so that's okay. So you're going to meet this character, Fernando, who's going to be a recurring character throughout the year. So this is baby Fernando. He's a new baby boy in Chilton, Texaco, South America, born to two happy parents. They're excited to begin a new life with him, and they look forward and think about how their son's future will look and how they can make it as bright as possible. So the question for you is, in your groups, write down what you think Fernando needs to realize his potential as a human being. So if we were to sculpt his environment and his the infrastructure in his life, in his society, in his community, in his family, what would he need to have in order to grow up to fulfill his potential as a human being. So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to do this. Grab a sheet of paper, not the one that's on your desk, a different one. With your group, jot down as many things as possible that you think you need.
Yeah, the camera. Should never say I got I would rather everyone works best for their religious stress. That's serious. That's serious. Guys, I'm sorry about you. We need food, shelter, and water. Yeah, but not always so bad. Like, yeah, but no. I agree with that, but I'm saying you shouldn't train him to always go back on something.
Support system meaning with my teacher.
Yeah. I want Fernando to realize his potential when he's not a joke.
What about morality?
He doesn't need
He needs perfect cheese.
But I can't just like get by. You can't have everything for your life. You need some kind of stress.
I phrase that as challenges.
Okay, I think this is what diagram. That's not what I said. I reached out there.
I think we should support a balance between like independence slash like stress.
Like think about medical school. It's hard. Yeah, medical school is really hard, and that's our stress. But we also have people that fall back on it. You know, like you need a balance between. You can't just have something solid. You need to be able to develop your own coping strategy.
Yeah, like the balance between.
That's what I'm saying. You don't have plans on this.
So you have to identify individual characteristics, what needs to be present for
Money to realize technology.
Like more specific, like actually
Let's put it on. You need an organization, like, you need like a government organization to do it or something.
So can you just write like easy access? Or does that do like
You can say infrastructure.
Like community infrastructure or something.
Installation.
That allows for water.
okay, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think you look at sort of it.
No.
Stop showing it. Like
You should just write that as
So
your
that's crazy for you.
I love that there's playlists.
he doesn't need it.
Because I fucking find it.
What is it?
I think everybody should.
Yeah, I can see that. Opportunities, happiness.
Like better yourself.
Alrighty, so stop where you're at, and I'm going to start with the group in the back. What did you guys come up with for what Fernando needs in order to realize his potential? Nutrition, did you say possibly democracy?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Health, so Dr. Oracle Clinic, security, law enforcement, economy, activities, fun, community centers, transportation, infrastructure, sanitation.
I'm going to stop you because you're going. The other groups are not going to be able to contribute anything. Okay, so that's a huge amount of stuff. You guys got a lot of the Maslow hierarchy needs here as well. You have education, and then also the infrastructure of education, schools, government, and maybe democracy, health, security, human security. So what you need for that, you need law enforcement system in place, having an economy, transportation. Okay, so what about this group here? What can you add to this list?
So, in addition to that, we kind of have some non-tangibles. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, like the supportive family, love, resilience, grit, good role models, both internal and external awareness, access to information, friends.
Okay. So you guys focused on some individual elements and then elements that you need in the family. So support structure, resilience, love, grit, having good role models, friends, having access to information. What would this group add to this list?
Money, stress, in the form of challenges.
Money, I like that.
Money, I like that.
Yeah. It's big.
Lots of money.
Money, challenges,
Opportunity.
opportunities.
Like the balance between, it's like stress, so the balance between like,
So that he can, okay, so he needs stress, but like some challenges, like you realize his own coping strategy.
not just always rely on the support system.
Yeah.
So,
A lot of other stuff I think is
yeah, literally everything. You guys had it all.
It needs grit and intelligence. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he would, but that would, he already has it, he just need to realize.
Oh, it's like grid.
Yeah. So I think this group had talked about grit. So let's take one of these things like education. So in order for him to have education, what does that mean? What do you need?
Money.
Okay.
Infrastructure.
You need teachers.
Infrastructure, teachers. How do you get teachers?
You have to pay them.
Back here. Okay. So schools. Jump right here. Schools. What else?
You need like a curriculum set in place.
Curriculum.
You have to know what you're
Books.
You need those students.
You need the access to information.
Access to information, transportation to school. What else do you need?
You need a place to
Supplies.
have the school.
Supplies, building. And what kind of education are we talking about? Are we talking about K through 12? Are we talking about higher education? What are we talking about?
Probably K through 12.
I think it depends where you are.
How are we getting these teachers? What kind of education do these teachers have? Do they just have a K through 12 education?
They might.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing. Where is this cheating place?
It's made up. It's made up. It's somewhere in South America, yet to be discovered.
Well, the teachers need to be made sure that they like know what to talk about.
So there need to be standards.
Standards.
So when I think of standards, I think of
Competency exams and tests.
well, there's also a mechanism to ensure those standards.
Evaluations.
Right? And to hold them accountable, right? So usually they're organizations or boards or things like that. And does education just happen?
You need a culture that encourages for culture society.
Okay, you need a culture that values education.
Family support.
Support.
Yeah.
You need security, right? If you're scared to walk to school because you're going to get kidnapped, you're probably not going to go to school.
You need rules set in place for the school itself, like conduct.
In that environment free of discrimination and harassment. Yeah. Well, he's a guy.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And do schools just pop up? Or how does a school come into existence? Whose responsibility is that? Whose job is that?
The government, Department of Education.
Yeah, not NGO.
Okay, so schools, we're thinking NGOs.
Or just the community.
Versus community versus in many places like faith-based organizations versus the government. Okay, awesome. What about something like somebody mentioned health? Here, what do you need for health?
Healthcare providers.
Healthcare providers. How do you get those?
Education.
Right. From our K through 12 education. Okay, so maybe higher education. And what else do you need for health?
Lifestyle. I guess like with active health advising.
Lifestyle. Vaccines. Who's responsible for vaccines?
Hospitals and clinics.
Hospitals, clinics,
Awareness.
diagnostics. Okay, so who's responsible for that?
At this age,
And who's responsible for that in the community that he lives in?
It doesn't go back to like NGOs, community.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
People running.
So here, you know, in our world, the government does a lot of this. In other places, some of these other actors. Is there anything else that's not on this list that you think he needs in order to realize his potential?
Set support system, but you have that.
Right. And bookmark that because we're going to come back to that as well. So this brings us to what is health? Are any of you Star Trek fans? Okay, awesome. I'm just going to talk to the two of you now. No, I'm kidding. So if an alien race of Klingons came to Earth and they asked you, what is health? How would you explain what that is? Do you know Klingon?
Yeah.
Klingon?
Yeah.
Can you speak it?
I'm doing great. How are you?
So how would you explain it in English? Homeostasis? Okay.
Not everyone needs to die in battle.
So your body's in homeostasis. Is that all that health is? Mental health? So it's a state of mental health, homeostasis with your body. Anything else? Happiness? General well-being, yeah. So part of what we're going to be doing in this class is when we think about health, you're going to be trained to think about health in the pure biomedical model of body, diseases, tumor cut out. It's going to be very board-like, but when we talk about health here, what we're really talking about is this WHO definition, which is very aspirational. You know, it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. So it takes into account the physical, the mental, and the social, which kind of gets into kind of the happiness aspect as well. But is anybody in this room healthy by this definition? You're happy? I should have asked you guys this the week of the test. We had very different responses last time. So just like many of the things that we're going to be talking about, this is going to be aspirational with what the international community wants to aspire to. Doesn't necessarily mean that we've achieved it or necessarily can even achieve it. But this is what we're talking about when we talk about health. And when we talk about global health, there are multiple different ways of thinking about global health. There is the individual approach of the person in front of you, the patient in front of you. There's a population level approach where you're looking at what are the health outcomes or characteristics or diseases of this particular population. How are they different from other populations? Then there's also the political economy approach, which is the one that we take here, which is not only looking at diseases and populations, but also looking at the influence of power and inequality and things like class and gender and race and how that impacts the health of individuals in a population as well. And for this political economy approach, it's not in a vacuum. It doesn't happen on an island by itself. It happens in a historical context. So that's something that we really want to hammer into you guys is when you do interface with when you do go on your global health rotations and you interface with people that have very different culture values from you, they may be looking at you through the lens of history. And it's important for you to know and understand what that is as well. So when we talked about development, there are lots of different kind of definitions of development. I like this one because it's short, sweet, and simple, which is how do we get here? What are we supposed to do? Where are we going and how do we get there? And for a long time, people thought development was a straight line, right? You go from underdeveloped or resource limited to developed. But that's not really the case. I mean, can you think of examples of places in the United States that you would look at and say, I really think this is underdeveloped or is a resource limited environment? Flint, Michigan, yeah. They're still dealing with the water crisis. And it's been, how long now? Yeah.
The American Indian reservations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And just recently, post-Harvey, we've been kind of helping some of our patients that live in Dickinson, Texas City area. And I mean, it's devastating. So this idea of development has traditionally been something that is conceived by the West, done to resource-limited countries, but there is no gold standard of development. And development really should be self-determination of what a country wants to be. But it hasn't always been that way. So I'm going to take you back a little bit. Please don't stab yourself in the neck and have a seizure. But if we go back to 15th, 17th century, it was kind of the area of the age of discovery. Well, it wasn't really discovery. The continents and everything were there, but you're not discovered unless you're discovered by Europeans. So this was really where Europeans went out and found new lands, new places, new populations, and built empires and expanded their empires. In the 17th, 18th century, European colonies were pretty much all over the world. They were in Southeast Asia, in the Americas, in parts of Africa, and many of these were public-private ventures. Anybody remember the Dutch East India Company? So in order to go to new places and extract resources and extract labor, a lot of governments partnered with these types of companies. So when they went in to these areas, they weren't going in with the Star Trek motto of just wanting to discover new civilizations. It was really to conquer, to extract resources, and to send it back. So in the late 1700s, early 1800s, there was revolution here, which also sparked revolution in other places as well. In the 1800s, there was a scramble for Africa. Almost every part of Africa has been colonized, with the exception of pretty much one country, by different European powers. And what they did is they came up, they carved out their individual territories and their lands like they do everywhere they go, and try to build colonies and extract resources. Anybody know who that is? heard of Whisper? Anybody heard of the Rhodes Scholars? That Cecil Rhodes, he had a dream of building a railway from Cairo to Cape Town. And it wasn't so everybody in between could get on and have holiday in other places. It was really to like have a pipeline of extracting resources along the way.
Which country was not colonized?
Ah, I knew somebody was going to ask me that.
Ethiopia.
Was it Ethiopia? Okay. So we have, with colonization, we have the first iteration of colonial medicine. So what we know as global health today spurned from this initial idea. And what colonial medicine was all about was, as European colonies are established in places where the colonists have never experienced diseases, where they're now bringing diseases to local populations, they needed some way of being able to contain those crises. So colonial medicine was really the first iteration of thinking about how can we manage the health of populations abroad. But it was really for the purpose of protecting their colonists and protecting their resources and labor. It then kind of morphed into international health and global health as we know it today. Anybody know what this fly is? Yes. So this is the African sleeping sickness fly. And during the colonial period, there was a lot of movement of people, of resources, social upheaval. There are places that kind of broke out into war. And it's estimated that about 500,000, that's conservative estimates, people died over a 10-year period in the Uganda-Congo area as a result of this. What normally happened is there's a natural life cycle to the way that people farm and the way that they used to do agriculture, where they would have these forests, they would burn them down, they would rise up again. With all this upheaval, agriculture was disrupted. That cycle that actually kept this fly in check was disrupted. So the forests grew, which were reservoirs for the fly, and so it got out of control. So what I want you guys to do right now, and I'm never going to ask you to do this again, is to put on your colonist hat. Makes me feel dirty even to say that. So look at this from the perspective of you're the colonizer. What kinds of things could you do to help stop the spread of this disease? Quarantine. Okay, so who said quarantine? Okay, so you guys are the French, because that's what they did. What else? You guys said something about burn it down. Let's see.
Set it on fire.
We're bug spray. Okay, I'm gonna have you guys be the British.
Yeah, what are wait. Something else.
Okay. Give me an idea because I forget there.
Kill the flies.
Kill the flies. You're the Portuguese.
Yeah. Or the British.
Okay. So each of you represent a particular approach from a different colony. So we have the French, the British, and the Portuguese. I want you to read through this with your group and now shift gears so you're not the colonizer, but you're being colonized. What are the benefits and harms of the approach that they use on your local community? So I'll give you you guys 5 minutes to talk about that in your group.
I want no mother back.
You learn how to start a fire. The Atlantic Coast from Congo to Mark LaBeouf from in 1986, 1988, advocated isolating the cities, taking away mainstream ideas to the tonsil. Regulation used to share liturgy to organize that went from village to village. In each village, they have to require object of pointers and then take their darkness nurses populated the plans for tonsil singing. Administered tonsil to everyone. After much better record available and evidence that to determine a tonsil resistant than provide the funds however involved as possible and then keep them on track for months. The following is French, maybe the last about
Wait, we already living here?
Yeah, so like if we were already with the
So we're okay.
No, like it's horrible, but like I think we already British.
I mean, they no, they should. You see that apparently that pesticides not only but other urban impacts affecting their crops.
Yeah, we don't have
But it also
crops.
That's pushing the crop. Okay, so they start isolating the sick and administering medications. So they're using insecticide.
Also,
they're coming in at gunpoint. Subtracting your neck out. Maybe and expertise in capital synthesis and industry.
Everyone has all these insect places.
Yeah, but if they're made by synthesis, it doesn't work.
They might work on certain parts, but it's not on specific. Like if it's other stuff, they say even bad.
I'm pretty sure everything's good.
No, not the crop. Not the flies.
There's I think some infected areas where they this is everyone. If you get hindsight, it's already done the board. Yeah. Okay, we say.
You said everyone's
So you have to, does it just have to decline? It means that people just keep them from coming. Essentially, you're just trying to save them, but.
It turns out it's a phone
I guess you have to like just like sometimes go.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't know we were doing that.
Like you still
I understand what you mean by they didn't know better. What are they supposed to know better?
Well, like, different friends,
yeah, I mean like.
they're like another thing. Like isolation.
So apparently the international knowledge base, like the medical knowledge is the land is not the phrase.
They knew better. They would, if it was happening in their community, where they were coming from, they would have better. So I don't think they knew better. I mean, they knew better, but they didn't also know better because when you, if you You hold it at one point, you go this.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm saying like some of the medical knowledge.
It's all. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't
Right, so we don't know.
Just genetically,
They knew what they were doing, but in the end, they saw this as a and that's all you can do.
and then slowly you will become extinct.
I know.
Effort of our own.
That's not the goal was that's what I want to do. Obviously, I feel to me makes me think that if I was sick, after I'm all that.
I thought I like
So yeah, why they just went on and on and but I was wondering if this one being as long
They thought that it was transferred, from person to person instead of from, so they themselves.
just like malaria, like they should be like I mean, I have no clue. That's just back in the ice, like people makes me think that there's a doctor. But that's
So this like reminds me a lot of
except for the
But like the way
So how they
the
handle
spread and how they can work it.
Sometimes this is that way. At this time, the forest is probably with trends in certain ways, having sicknesses and transfer. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's strange. This insects like this. It's true. My thing is, how did they know what to use if they didn't know what it was?
I'm intrigued.
Well, it sounds like that time.
Okay, guys, let's come together. Okay, let's start with the British. Tell us what the British did and how it impacted the community.
So it started off with the Italians coming to Africa and they brought rinderpest, which killed all the animals and people. So then the forest took off, which invited tsetse flies, and then we have a problem now with the sleeping sickness. And the British tried controlled burning of the bush to eliminate the habitat, and also insecticides to kill the tsetse flies. Neither was.
And what was the impact?
Their crops were destroyed, and it didn't get rid of any of their problems. Yeah, devastation, but no solution.
So it ended up not even working. Okay. And you guys are the French. So tell us what the French did and how it impacted the
So essentially, the French came in and they used hydrosis of this toxal medicine to treat the people after isolating them, and then they just went to every village and checked people by like at gunpoint most of the time by like checking their puppet and their neck to see if it was like swelling, and then they just would administer this medicine to a bunch of people, even if you didn't have it. Their whole goal was to eliminate the disease with the medication, but it became resistant and like better medication came out. So they like ruined families and like pretty much took people away and put them at gunpoint and scared everyone to try to
Did it work?
network.
What do you suppose happened to people that resisted either quarantine or taking the medication by gunpoint? So the Portuguese tell us what the Portuguese tried, and if it worked, did it not work, and what was the impact on the local.
I guess the Portuguese, they brought over a bunch of convicts and had them go into the forest and drain the swamps and come back and forth the brush and they also had them wear black clothes because the tsetse flies were attracted to it, and so they went around catching and killing the flies, and they were actually able to eradicate it. Yeah, until the 1950s. Was effectively free of tsetse flies and silky sickness. It's a small number. Yeah. Toxel, yeah, all the inhabitants were examined and injected with toxel, and the six were segregated in special camps. So, kind of broad dissemination things.
So did something similar to the French, but then have to add their own flavor of humorous violations and all of it. So, what was the impact on the
Might not follow.
Or you looked at me the wrong way. And did they get offered treatment?
It said everyone was.
So it turns out that a toxel ends up being very toxic as well, and breeding a lot of resistance under the fly. So of all of these, and I had some other ones I had multiple British groups, they were everywhere, Belgian. The Portuguese example was the only one that was successful, but it was because of special environmental factors and the fact that they were an island. So once you eradicate the flies, you're not going to quickly be able to come back. It's not like mosquitoes of Galveston. So what do you guys think the motivations were of these colonizers in the approaches that they took?
To have labor to extract the resources that they wanted.
Have labor, extract resources.
Less cost for the most gain. So like basically they wanted the resources and the labor, so they're trying to minimize losses of that while also minimizing their costs.
How did they justify that to themselves and to their populations back home? Anybody know?
We're helping people.
We're helping people, right?
Getting rid of
A deadly disease. We're civilizing.
We're civilizing.
They were like probably works trying to come up with crazy ideas to treat it before they were home.
Right. So all of this ended up being under the guise of a helpful, civilizing mission, which is a word that they used a lot. And there's been a lot of really great literature on ways in which you have to process what you're doing to justify it to yourself and to everyone else. There's been a lot of that in genocide studies as well. But I wanted to bring your attention to this if you can read it. So these are the reasons why you guys are here, why you guys want to do global health. So you mentioned wanting to get more medical practice experience, learning about infectious diseases, expanding your knowledge of medicine and treating in different contexts, living abroad, traveling, doing long-term meaningful work, learning about other cultures, serving the vulnerable populations, exploring new communities and cultures, giving back, doing work that's rewarding, learning about health systems, being able to counter health disparities, making a difference, and engendering a global perspective. So you guys are very far away from the colonists that tried to cure sleeping sickness. But when you go into global health settings, you're going to be seen through the lens of every single person that has come to try to do good, always under the guise of wanting to do good. So we need to be very cognizant and kind of own our history as a global health entity. But our motivations are very different right now than they used to be. But the legacy of colonialism, the legacy of discrimination, of racism, it's still there, and it's very palpable, especially in communities that have been exposed to various different groups of people kind of coming in and coming out. So I think that's just an important perspective to keep in the back of your head. And it makes you much more humble when you're engaging with other communities. Any comments, thoughts, musings? So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. World War II happened, and with the international community being more activated than probably ever before, post-genocide, it really did become a turning point in international discourse, where countries wanted to come together to say we can never allow this to happen again, though it has, and it is. But with the different countries coming together, the United Nations was founded, and around the same time, they also needed a mechanism of being able to reconstruct portions of Europe that had been devastated by World War II. So the initial goal of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, which are these superpowers in development, was to aid in reconstruction of Europe after World War II. Around the same time, there was a huge effort towards decolonization. So not only was it starting to become unpopular and there was public opposition to it, but at a time when Europe was decimated, they couldn't afford to have these colonies. So they started with very rapid decolonization. And as we saw earlier, there weren't clearly defined boundaries in a lot of places. So the colonial powers essentially drew the boundaries, which is part of the reason we have so much conflict in a lot of areas with borders that are arbitrarily drawn. But that is the legacy of colonialism. So since the end of colonialism, there has been a concerted international effort to help with bringing some of these kind of newly founded countries up from those that are with low GDP, very resource limited, to improving their development. So that's kind of where we're at right now in the history of development, is figuring out how do we actually do this and do it better than it used to be done. So we've also had a recession. We've had to deal with the global financial crisis. So that has really hampered a lot of development efforts. Sorry. We'll talk a little bit more about development as well next month when we go through international aid and and humanitarian assistance. But in thinking about development, I want you guys to work together with the whiteboards on your desk and create a physical, visual representation of what is development. We have some crafts up here. Select a member of your group to come up, grab as much as they want, and build the physical representation of development using your little board. And be prepared to explain and justify it. So I'll give you guys.
Rob, we're showing you a useful member. We're like markers.
Just drawing out and
Okay, we definitely need an octopus. This hippo? Oh, dude, I wanted that one. This panda.
A turtle?
Okay, I got him.
Yeah. We like looked at it, trying to fly out and come out, but no,
I don't think it does.
gone.
Move me.
Hold up.
Make this violence.
So we go like a tower, and then we put like bedrooms on top.
Colors give you harmony.
Just on a large scale.
So you know what we do? I don't know why. What is your large scale? That feels like.
You're the one who's anything out. Oh, transportation.
Why does it look like? What do you think?
all the colors and shapes.
Diversity. You gotta see me Forrest broken down. It's turned into for British AI. That was I like that I just say.
Maybe so you can think about like making some kind
And it's on the wrong side. So that's representing.
They're not living
They're not living in harmony.
And then now we construction. Basically, water animals are very
This is like racism, but without it. I got this phone right here.
How do you guys want to make this happen?
This is
It's turned on up here, and then we're trying to.
We're trying to make a path. Look, Hasselback. Look, Hasselback. You got the Sorry, quadrangular space. Go ahead. A house. What if we do a house, guys? And like, I guess, start like here. Yeah, and then at the top. There you go. Yeah, we for the foundation.
Yeah, I got you.
Dude, I got like a brilliant idea. What if we take all these pom-poms?
Okay, also one day I was at the same orientation we were sitting there. Call it. Yeah, call it aggressive. The day of the same orientation, you shove Tim up. And y'all go inside in and you shut the hell up. I was kind of the first on it.
Yeah.
Then when you have to.
Did you jack this or
That's the thing you
I wish.
Oh my god.
No, I not. We bought it just for you guys.
I'm just gonna go ahead and take
Why is there a pom-pom on the back?
extra glue? It's a simple. That everyone has to be on the same page. Everyone, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone starts
It's
first.
like, I leave you okay, it's not the good part. Go on, paper three. On, outside of on. I know.
There's a new series called
Yeah.
Discovery.
Jason and I.
Well, these
So good.
things, like, you're serious. Like, they'll be on the outside.
If you really don't need this, it's
Torrented, okay. This is the
Yeah.
Quiet.
I didn't know this. Hold on my camera.
It's like sleeping.
my Kendrick Lamar song.
I like
Mad City.
Yeah.
There's like a few ones. Oh, that's so long.
Oh, cool.
I was opposing Obi-Wan in the rap battle, which is actually a really hard battle because Obi-Wan like has almost no flaws other than
I like how they're getting small.
and then I switched to that because like I got a rap and dropped a watch on the second one. This is fine. I'm ordinary though, not ordinary. I got green blood, but I'm still happy with it. Don't worry about it. I'm so happy. There you go. My mom's brother, my dad's
Like literally on the road. I guess it's not a straight path. Yeah.
I always keep my phone when I'm in a play channel, not grab lights out with the open up.
I love that. You're a Cali.
Yeah, I have it like written down.
Oh, right on.
I was like 2 years ago. Yeah, it was like 2 years ago. Probably new generation.
There you go. Next gen.
Yeah,
Next gen. Get out of here. Do that feather. We have tape. We got tape. What is that?
Does he any other ideas?
Oh, like you can like line, but line gets then it gets okay. I like this. All right. It's just the art comes out of or what if I put it here, like you're halfway through and you feel like you're about to die? Yeah.
Thinking about my baby.
That's all right. Oh, exactly. Both retro both. Oh, I know what you want.
Dark in the city now.
We're gonna make a heart out of blue glitter.
The roadblock.
As you can tell,
Oh, okay. These are like, you know those doors, like you hit a door and it's like, if I go to this door, because the door might be this way, you know, when doors do the right one, it's like deal or no deal, like y'all on this one, I'm on this one. I'm 4 doors, it's like, you know, and then I'm like a big one, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
like the freedom.
Door to prosperity. Like when you open that door, you realize, like, hey, I'm not too far from the top. You got something up there for us?
I just won. Is that black?
What did you find? We're going to give that to this young gentleman right here.
So that's
You guys take 2 more minutes.
Oh, we got one too.
Okay, I'll give you guys 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds. Oh, we still got yours.
No, look, I got my board. So basically, you just have to go in between. And there was one more thing right here. Like on here. Down here. There you go. Right that right there. How's that gonna fit in this little triangle? Just write it facial anatomy. Good on what? Somebody write. I don't be able to read it.
Come run.
Oh, yeah, and then always everything. Oh, yeah, that's why.
It's supposed to be in the circle. They're going to like to listen to the first finish. Let them present their visual representation of development and explain their rationale for force. Can you guys lift that up? Okay, so we're going to gather around.
We're done.
This is what comes to mind when you think of development. Very clearly labeled concepts next by we're an organization, so we have our wildlife, we have our agriculture, tomatoes and grapes, people. We also have
Industry.
conservation.
The animals. These are farms.
Eat them with them.
So what kind of vision and development does this symbolize or
Self-sufficient. I am on the middle.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Up with water. Yeah.
Tree. That's not a tourist attraction.
and you have a tree. Awesome. What does the spider represent?
That's like the best
It's part of the wildlife.
It's not quite in.
Alrighty, thank you. Okay, what about the script here?
Paulette.
You hold up your
Paulette. Alright, so I don't know if you guys can all see it.
Now we here.
So basically, where we're at the bottom, we have the animals right here. And then you get, so basically you have like
We have roadblocks. Okay, all right. So this is our house, and from the inside or from the outside, you go inside, and you have like you have this roadblock specifically, and then obstacles that you come to, and then you get halfway, and then you have like doors. Because it's like you don't want to look wrong, you want to look right, because you look wrong like that. And then get up to the top and you're there. So that's it. That's the bottom right here. So the wall is going on.
Yeah. So we kind of split it up into two halves. On this
Okay, so this half is kind of like black and white. And what we meant by that is kind of like symbolizing violence and war. And see some of these animals kind of like turned over to the side. It's like argument, taking them out. Symbolizing, yeah, like violence and war and destruction. It's kind of like that side. And what was the tree again?
The tree is supposed to represent harmony and peace among them all. Like, there's war on this side, but the people over here, they're protected by the tree. And they worship the tree. And they hope to live a happy life.
Tree, like an avatar.
Oh, yeah. Alright, so, and then this like blue tree here was speech. For those of you guys who can't see, we have like some water animals here. But this represents like clean access to water. So this blue, like, yeah, this is like a river. Like this little blue thing. And then this side, even though it looks kind of like Rastafarian, Bob Marley, this ran out of colors. So this was supposed to be a rainbow because this is black and white, and this is the rainbow. So this is symbolizing, clean access to water development, growth.
And it's like people, all their halls.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even see that. That was a new addition. So this is like a harmony of people holding hands under this Rastafarian rainbow. Yeah, so.
It's a good contrast.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Dr. Patel,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you ask the students to present in front of your cameras so that we can see what their showing is holding and talking about?
Yeah, there's some that are probably going to fall down, but others that I think will be okay. Do you guys want to just bring this up to do a little recap in the camera? Is this the camera you guys are at?
Theirs is the most portable.
One, two, three.
Wait, is this like King Wars?
I'm not sure where you guys are going to put the camera in here.
We can move the camera. That's it. Can you see it?
I can see the feathers on the top. That's all I can see.
Okay, now can you see it?
A little bit further, but there you go. That's good.
All right.
Good. Thank you.
Isn't it great?
It's wonderful. Now it's just the feathers again.
Ah.
You guys,
I'll hold it, you explain it.
Yeah.
It's our turn.
Oh, yeah, it's all straight up. Well, come on up.
Right here.
You want to explain it a little bit?
She's like, I did sign up for that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's right here. We start from the bottom, and then you get up to the top. Can you hear me? Hello?
I just mute myself so you can't hear any noise from here, but I hear you just fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's it. We just have some roadblocks, and we're trying to get to the top where you have, like, greatness.
Abstract development.
Abstract, yeah.
She muted it, so you can't hear her. Just said that.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we have another one coming. It's very tenuous.
Spider skull, you lost the spider.
It's alright, but that's all the bad stuff. So this is like the fragility of civilization.
Okay, so we have like nice little organized sections. Here was our farm, which represents self-sufficiency. We had animals and stuff. Crops on this side. Here was the industrial center where you go to community centers and churches and things like that. And here was our tree of life. We also had a tree of life, and it represented our tourist attractions. Yes. And that was our civilization.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Anybody know who this is? Ever seen it before? This is Amartya Sen. He's a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He wrote the famous book Development is Freedom, which I highly recommend. And what he talks about is, when we're thinking about development, a lot of times we think about the money, right? That was like our biggest sign up on the board here. But his central argument is that development isn't about money, it's about what you can do with it, right? It's about how it can enhance your life, how it can create opportunities for you to live the kind of life you want to live. So on TV, when somebody wins the lottery, what is the first question they're asked? What are you going to do with it? The assumption is they're not going to just keep living their life the way they always have and not touch it, not use it, right? So he talks about development not as a how much stuff do you have perspective, but from the perspective of how much freedom do you have to live the kind of life that you want to live, to do the kinds of things with your life and your time that you want to do. So this is a concept that's known as human capability, and we'll come back to that a little bit later in the year. But early on we asked the question, what does Fernando need in order to realize his potential as a human being? And you guys have a lot of answers to that. I'm sorry if you can't read this. Now I want to flip that a little and ask, what does Fernando need to be healthy? We have this list up here of his potential. What can we knock off this list that he doesn't need? Does he need nutrition, food to be healthy? Yeah. Okay.
Money.
Does he need money to be healthy?
It depends on what you're saying. And also socially. You don't need
for medication.
healthy, but depending on where you live and the environment that you live in, you can be dependent on paying someone to make sure that you're healthy. So well, when you said healthy, right? But we're talking about social health, just period. Mental health, yeah. Physical health.
Do you need money to like buy the food and water and that stuff?
So you gotta pay for like the services to be healthy. Like the mental health services.
I think fundamentally you don't need money if you have access.
Yeah. Like if you can get all that without money.
In the ideal world, you wouldn't need money, but in the real world, where we need money.
So, and this isn't just personal wealth. This is living in a city, a state, a country that is wealthy enough to provide those social services, to provide, the infrastructure that's needed. So, do you need this? Okay. What about stores? Do you need stores? Education? Do you need education in order to be healthy?
I would say
choices.
well, you need to take care of yourself. I would say yeah.
Okay. Why?
Because like one specific example I can think of is like this is super specific, but people who, as far as mental health goes, like people who don't like follow up with education later on can be predisposed to like dementias and Alzheimer's and stuff like that. So maybe not short term, but long term health. If we're evaluating it from a long term perspective, then I would say yes. Education.
Okay. And we know things like if the more higher education you have, likely the longer your life expectancy. There's a huge difference in disease outcomes among people who don't graduate high school and then those that graduate college. So we know that it matters to health, right? Anything else on here that we can take out? The economy, do you need an economy to be healthy?
I guess you can't think of anything.
Okay, let's try to take something out. Supportive family, do you need that?
Yeah.
Okay.
For stress.
I don't think
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dependent on the culture that we live.
Yeah.
And I would say, including education or 12 level, because I know several people who didn't get past middle school. Probably don't even know.
So this list actually looks really different when we do it with different populations of students in different places. So for students that are where a lot of their self-identity is more with their community and their family, this list looks a little bit different. So you're absolutely right for pointing out, like, this is still like our Western bias and our Western lens. Is there anything else that you guys think we can get rid of?
I mean, how do we define health? What is the scope of health? Like, you're physically well, you don't have any diseases, but does being healthy also include having a career, having an income, having a job?
So it's a complete state of physical, mental, social well-being, and lack of disease or infirmity. You don't need a job to be healthy.
If you live in a place where you're happy and you're doing the things that you love, like every single day, you can do that without
So let's take that. Let's look at that question from a population perspective. Okay, so if you look at a population of 30,000 people that live in a particular place, a small place, do you think there would be any correlations between health and what we are doing, education or income, jobs? Would there be any correlation?
People who have jobs probably healthier.
So is it possible for one individual to defy this, to not need all the components? Sure. I mean, there are tons of people that are the outliers. Probably lots of us in this room are outliers that didn't have some of this and still ended up being successful. But what we're talking about here is if we're optimizing this, we're looking at it from a population perspective. Chances are that Fernando is going to need an economy in order to not only realize his potential, but to be healthy. It's going to affect the kind of jobs he has, the kind of risks that he can take with the kind of work that he does as well, the kind of income he can bring in. So we know that in different places in the not just in the United States, but in some other countries too, your zip code is one of the biggest predictors of your health status. We have a really great epidemiologist that can track all this, even in Galveston. They can look to see, depending on which side of the street you live, your health outcomes are different. So, what about friends? Can we get rid of friends? Okay.
I mean, the support system in general.
We can come up with outliers for every situation. Suppose you had an asocial person who didn't like other people, then you would be healthy, happy with other people, I guess, so you wouldn't need friends.
One is the support system in general, but that could be friends, that could be family, that could be different from each person. But
so maybe we should just give them all the options.
So we can't sit here and say he doesn't need that or that or that.
So Fernando needs to decide.
Yes.
And the
If
type.
he lives in the middle of nowhere, then he doesn't need money because there can be self-sufficient on what he's at. But if he lives in the middle of Bogota, Colombia, he could be just like that, then he's gonna need money. It's just so there's
So are there any of these that everyone can agree on, knowing what we know about Fernando, which is very little right now, but you'll get to know him, that we can take off the list here?
is that a democracy?
I'm just gonna like do this.
Yeah, okay.
We can spend 3 hours just talking about that. Role models?
Yeah.
Do you need role models to be healthy?
Really?
You need role models to be successful, but
Because a lot of people do have role models. Like, what do we do in TNT? Like, everyone has like 5 different types of roles. Everyone here has someone that they look up to. If he chooses not to look up to a role model, I feel like
But usually role models in this setting are not like paid professionals. They're your family, your parents. And we also know that parents who smoke are more likely to have kids that smoke because of the role modeling that they do and that they see.
So which way are you arguing? Are you saying role models are required to be healthy or not required?
They can't.
I'm asking you guys, what do you think?
They can be up.
You can have a bad role model, yes.
You can have a bad role model.
You don't need.
I don't think you should.
You don't need it?
I think you should.
Depending on who your role model is, I think it's like one of those like it can affect it.
Okay, but I guess that's the same with everything, right? Like, we don't just want a crappy government. We want a good government, right? We don't want a corrupt government. So we're already assuming that these things are kind of the best versions of themselves.
Maybe he doesn't need access to information. When I think of access, I think books and the internet, and I think people can be healthy and happy without the internet. Or I mean, there are lots of people who can't read who are healthy.
Yeah.
So, what's the internet or books gonna?
That's
What is that for you? You can't read.
That's all. So maybe like there's formal education up there because I mean there's all kinds of different kinds of education.
But access to information can be like, poison ivy or where to find like berries to eat. It like depends on where you are. So like if you definitely, if you're in like a third world country, you need that information or you won't survive.
So it's not just
mushrooms and that.
Right. And that's still access to information. So can we take that out?
Yeah.
I feel like the reason why we evolved as humans.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you this: why are we taking this out? Maybe
Should we not be taking things out?
No, I don't think we should.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to leave it like this?
Yeah.
So if Fernando needs these things in order to realize his potential, which is kind of the goal of development, and he needs these things in order to be healthy, then goals of development and the goals of health seem to be the same. Or similar, right? Okay, so we can't really take anything out. Hence the slide. Thanks for making that point. So we're going to wrap up there. I want you guys to think as you're consuming the news and the literature and reading articles, I want you guys to think about different ways in which development is actually done. And your assignment for next time is going to be to take a look at the literature, the news, and find a real-world article that looks at international aid in your profession. And upload it onto Blackboard, and then reflect on why development matters to those people who want to actually practice global health in the context of your profession.
Is that what we had that one today?
The development one was when you first day.
What you did there?
Thank you guys.
Is that question that you posted?
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be on all the slides you can show us.
Okay. Okay.
No, it starts 17 by like 20 minutes.
So it's not even gonna be. I thought it was
So There, you know, we are the one person.
Yeah, I know.
We don't find out, but if you actually step